I know a lot of people get out there and, for instance, they grab a file and they just start filing away, and it's really, they're kind of doing it by eye, and there's a lot of guesswork involved in there.
You still see a lot of that out there, and that's sort of the traditional way, is just taking a simple round file and just doing it by eyeball or total hand filing, looking at that top plate angle and trying to guide just from feel. A lot of problems can occur with that. One of the more common ones is you can cut down with the file. If you're doing it by hand, you cut down into this gullet too far and you create a hook. And the hook, it's a nice sharp point and it feels sharp, but when you have a real sharp hook out there, it can easily get bent down, and then it loses a lot of its cutting performance. So we don't recommend sharpening just with a round file by hand anymore. Also, chainsaws are moving a lot faster than they were back in the days, and the tolerances are such, and you want your performance up, so you want to have a little more precise way of sharpening the chain.
So now there are a number of file guides on the market, aren't there?
Sort of a standard file guide that's been around a long time is just a flat gauge on a round file, and you simply lay the flat side of the gauge on top of the particular tooth you're filing, and then you have different angles here that you can read, and then you simply file the tooth in that manner.
Okay.
Now that simply files the cutter, does not do anything for the depth gauge. There are other devices that also file just a cutter. Here's one we call a roller guide, and it simply sits on the chain chassis and it moves with the chassis. So there you don't even have to worry about the angle you're working at. And then you simply put the file on the two rollers between them and then file forward as well. And that keeps the file from making that deep gullet. Both of those file guides keep the file up high so that you keep this chisel angle nice and sharp.
That's good. You know, you mentioned about taking down the depth gauge. You get a lot of people out there who they start sharpening the tooth, and next thing you know, they're taking a flat file to their depth gauge, and they say, I want to get rid of this. I want this saw to really cut.
Again, traditionally, you'll see a lot of people every so often, whether it's every other day or once a week or periodically, they'll take a flat file and they'll just simply rub it across there 3, 4, or 5 times, and they'll try to do the same for each tooth and each depth gauge, and they'll think that that's enough. Well, over time, certainly over a couple filings, your chain will get totally out of balance, and you'll have some teeth that are doing the load and doing the aggressiveness. Other teeth are just flying by, not cutting anything, and that reduces your performance. It also adds to that vibration and the wear on your bar and your chain.
Yeah, it seems to be a lot of guesswork in doing it that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, there are a couple depth gauges when you do your depth gauge. After you've filed your teeth, periodically you want to do your depth gauge as well. Here's sort of a typical depth gauge that sits across an average of several teeth, and the depth gauge will stick up in the center of that, and then you simply take a flat file guide and file across that, and that gauges the depth gauge correctly, and then you just move to the next depth gauge, and again, it's an average of 4 or 5 teeth using this type of depth gauge.
Now, because it's an average of 4 or 5 teeth, can that be detrimental?
It works well as long as all of your teeth are exactly the same length. And we know that sometime you're going to damage one tooth or one side of the tooth a little bit more because you might hit a rock or something and just damage 2 or 3 teeth. Well, you want to be able to file them down farther so they're sharp, but yet if you're using a depth gauge like that, you may not have that tooth tuned to itself. So there are depth gauges available that this is a filing plate that actually tunes the tooth independent of all the other teeth. So you're actually filing the depth gauge for each tooth. And that means that your teeth can be different length as long as you've tuned each depth gauge to that tooth. And it simply lays on the point of the tooth down to the chassis, and then a flat file will go across the top. This particular one even has a gauge for soft and hard wood, so this files it down just a little bit farther, so it's a little more aggressive for softer woods.
Well, that looks like that would work nicely. That might eliminate a lot of unnecessary filing in order to make sure that your teeth are all the same size.
It's very helpful. And again, it's important to have those teeth tuned to their top performance. Now we've made sure that the tooth is sharp and everything's properly tuned. We also want to check the rest of the chain chassis. First of all, you want to make sure it's comfortably laying on the bar. If it's raised up off the bar in an uncharacteristic manner, it may mean that there's still some obstruction in the bar groove, such as dirt or possibly carbon buildup. You may want to go back and re-clean the groove of your saw, of the bar. Then you want to check the rivets. You want to check the shape of the rivets, make sure that they aren't showing excessive wear. You also want to check the heel and the toe of both the cutter as well as the drive, as well as the connecting link. The heel is the rear part and the toe is the front part. And if they're showing excessive wear, it can mean excessive vibration. It's also going to put excessive wear on the bar. So you want to make sure that those do not show excessive wear. Finally, you want to tension your chain on the bar. And to do that, with a sprocket nose bar, you should have it snug up at the bottom, and it should not have any droop. But you should also, with the chain brake off, be able to freely turn that chain.
It's always important, isn't it, to use a glove when working with the chain.
Exactly. You should always wear a gloved hand when you're working with the chain, whether you're sawing or... It's always important.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate this, Mark. We've looked at different types of bars and a few different types of chains, and we can see how important it is to make sure that they're well maintained and that we keep a nice sharp chain, because the chainsaw is a very high performance piece of equipment, and we want to make sure that everything's in proper working order so that we can get the maximum use out of it.